Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.
Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we will be analyzing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated December 9th, 2020. The topics to be discussed today are reflected on your screen and the timestamping for the same has been given in the description box below. So let's begin. Now this article appears as the lead article on page number 6 titled The Dangers of Misplaced Optimism. Well, the context of the news is that recently the NSO has released the GDP estimates for the second quarter of the financial year 2021. And in the second quarter, India's GDP has contracted by almost 7.5%. Now, this contraction of 7.5% is way better than the contraction of 24% which India witnessed in the first quarter of 2020-21. Hence, accordingly, the government now believes that the country's economy is recovering quite well post the COVID-19. However, in this article, the author has raised his concerns that such optimism on the part of government is rather a misplaced one. And he feels that if the government starts feeling that the economy is getting back on track due to these GDP figures, then what will happen is that the government will not focus on providing fiscal stimulus. Rather, the government will continue to be conservative in providing the fiscal stimulus, and this can have an adverse impact on the economy. So, basic idea here, what the author is stating is that this economy recovery hype is rather a misplaced one, and the government should continue to focus on fiscal stimulus. And to prove his case, he has given us certain data and figures. To understand this, we have to first understand about the basic of GDP measurement. Now, if we were to calculate GDP through the expenditure method, the formula is C plus G plus I plus X minus M. Here, as you know, C stands for private final consumption expenditure, G stands for the government's final consumption expenditure, I of course is investment, and X stands for export and M stands for import. So X minus M is nothing but your net exports. Now here we have this figure where the contribution of these various subsegments to the GDP has been stated. As you will be seeing here, the private final consumption expenditure amounts to almost 60% of the GDP, whereas the government final consumption expenditure amounts to somewhere around 12%. Then 31% is gross investment and net exports is -3. Now the reason I'm showing you this figure is to tell you that it is the private final consumption expenditure plus gross investment in our country which are the drivers of growth or the drivers of GDP. But due to the COVID-19, our economy has faced the twin shock where both the supply and the demand have suffered greatly. And since now the private final consumption expenditure is down and even the investment is down, the economy solely will have to rely on the government spending, which is known as the fiscal stimulus, to bring it back on track. To make this point simple to you, let us talk about the impact of COVID-19 on our economy. Now this circular flow chart here will explain to you what has happened to our economy due to COVID-19. Now, as I stated, our economy has witnessed twin shock, that is the demand and supply side shock. Now, with the COVID-19, what happened, as you all know, that investment declined. And not only just investment declined, even the expenditure by the household, that is the private consumption expenditure, also declined. Now, when both of these main drivers declined, there was decrease in the profit margins of the various companies and the corporates. And due to this, there was also loss of job. So what does loss of job do? Loss of job significantly reduces your income, and if you do not have sufficient income, you will not be able to have sufficient expenditure. And if you do not have enough profits, you will not be able to invest further. Then due to this loss of job and decrease in profit margin, as far as the corporate side is concerned, since corporate was not making profits and was reeling under loss, they were unable to pay back the loan they had took from the banks. This resulted in increase in the non-performing assets of the bank. And this increase in the NPA led to poor financial position of the bank. So now since the bank is in a poor financial condition, the bank itself was unable to give more loan to the corporates or the companies so that they could increase their supply or they could increase their business. And since that never happened, again there was a decline in investment and consumption expenditure, decline in profit, and thereby non-payment of loans and increase in NPA, and all this developed into a cycle. And what is more sad is the fact that this twin shock has had a contagion impact on other critical sectors of our economy as well, such as real estate and manufacturing. I hope now you can see it better. On real estate and manufacturing. So all the sectors of the economy has taken a severe hit. So basically what you need to keep in mind is that COVID-19 has had a twin shock on our economy, where both the demand and the supply have now been disrupted. The corporates do not have enough money to invest into their business so as to increase the supply, and even the households and their consumption has suffered a decline because they too have lost their jobs. They too do not have steady incomes and not enough money to increase their consumption expenditure. So now are you able to relate to the point which I mentioned in the beginning? So since both the consumption expenditure and the private investment is down, what our economy needs to rely on is government's fiscal stimulus, that is government's final consumption expenditure. And hence in this regard only the author was saying that the government should not be too happy about the improvement in our GDP figures and should continue to focus on providing fiscal stimulus. Then the author has mentioned certain lessons which can be learnt from the latest GDP number which have been brought out by the NSO as far as the second quarter of 2021 is concerned. Now there are signs of short-run recovery as far as the private final consumption expenditure is concerned, our net incomes are concerned, and even the consumer confidence is concerned. However, all this is still low as compared to the previous years. So even though the author is not denying there has been an increase in our private final consumption expenditure, in our incomes and consumer confidence, however, we have not reached to the pre-COVID stage. Hence, it is too fast for the government to say that yes, everything is well and that PFCE is again back on the rise. Second is that there has been a poor revival of demand, and this poor revival in demand can lead to poor revival of gross investments rate. Because obviously if there is no demand from the consumer side, even the corporates or the companies or the suppliers will be reluctant to increase investment into their business in order to increase the supply, right? Because it's very simple, why do businesses want to increase their supply? Business will want to increase their supply when the demand is more. Since demand is only so less, why would anyone take the additional risk of taking new kind of loan or making any improvements or investment in their already failing businesses? Thirdly, now since, as I mentioned earlier, the major drivers of India's GDP is the private final consumption expenditure and the gross investment, and since both of them continue to be very poor, hence there is a need to enhance the government's final consumption expenditure. Because if the government keeps on increasing its expenditure, this will lead to creation of what? Capital assets. And this creation of capital asset will lead to revival of both the private final consumption expenditure and the investment. For example, let's say if the government invests higher, let's say on construction of highways. So if highways are being constructed, then what will happen? Jobs will be created. Employment opportunities will be created. And jobs are nothing but demand. Similarly, the demand for iron and steel will also go up because iron and steel is a raw material which is required to create highways. And when this demand for iron and steel will go up and other raw materials such as cement and all will go up, this will do what? This will lead to increase in your investment as well. So this is just an example to tell you how government's final consumption expenditure or the government's fiscal stimulus leads to improvement in both the private final consumption expenditure and the gross investment from the corporates or the businesses side. Now coming to the way forward, the author in this article has stated, as far as the government stimulus or government's final consumption expenditure is concerned, it increased in the first quarter of 2021. Okay, however, in the second quarter, the government's expenditure has decreased by almost 22% compared to what it was contributing in the last financial year. And now we have to consider the fact that the Indian economy is reeling under a slowdown. and almost approaching a technical recession. Hence, the government should increase its final consumption and expenditure rather than reducing or contracting it. And the fact that the government has reduced its consumption expenditure in the second quarter points to the fact that government is adopting a stance of fiscal conservatism rather than fiscal stimulus to counter the economic slowdown. And this, according to the author, is wrong, and the government must focus on enhancing the government's final consumption expenditure in order to revive the Indian economy. Hence, the basic idea or the basic takeaway from this article is that key to revive Indian economy is the government's final consumption expenditure. So this is what this entire article was stating. With this, let's take up our next news. Now, this next news has been taken from page number 7, titled The Rise of AI Economy. And in this article, the author is saying that we need to pay attention to 3 focal areas if India wants to become the artificial intelligence powerhouse of the world. Now, in the DNS dated 11th June 2019, I have exhaustively spoken about artificial intelligence in our economy, the benefits of it, the challenges of it, and how we can regulate it. What we covered in that discussion is a lot more comprehensive than the 3 points mentioned in this article. So I'm going to attach that video discussion in our today's lecture. This news appears as an article on page number 11. And in this article, the authors are arguing the urgent need to come up with a legal framework to regulate the sphere of artificial intelligence. The following discussion of ours will become relevant from the perspective of GS Paper 2 in the category of government policies and intervention for development in various sectors. And in addition to GS Paper 2, this discussion can also become important from the perspective of GS Paper 3 under the category of science and technology and their applications in our everyday life. So let us begin our discussion with firstly answering the question, what exactly is artificial intelligence? At the outset, you should know that artificial intelligence might just be the single largest technology revolution of our lifetime because it has a potential to disrupt almost all aspects of human existence. Now, artificial intelligence is generally understood as a constellation of technology that enables machines to act with a higher level of intelligence, and this in turn lets the machine emulate human capabilities such as that of sense, comprehend, and act. So to put very simply, artificial intelligence refers the ability of a machine to perform cognitive tasks like thinking, perceiving, learning, problem solving, decision making, etc. Now, initially, artificial intelligence was conceived as a technology that could mimic or emulate, that is, copy, human intelligence. But of late, it is being realized that artificial intelligence has evolved in such ways that far exceed its original conception or imagination. Now, realizing the potential which the artificial intelligence hold in today's world, Niti Aayog last year in June released a discussion paper on National Strategy for Artificial Intelligence. In this discussion paper, the Niti Aayog has talked about focusing on the 5 major sectors which have the chances of benefiting the maximum from artificial intelligence. The foremost of the sector is healthcare. Artificial intelligence can be used in healthcare to increase the access as well as affordability to quality healthcare services. In fact, this article only mentions an example where in December last year, a cardiologist performed the world's first in-human telerobotic coronary intervention on a patient who was nearly 32 kilometers away. So basically, by using robots, we can even perform surgeries on patients who do not have access to hospitals and specialized healthcare. In fact, just 3 days back, there was also a news that in a small village in Uttarakhand, a drone was used to transport blood sample from a remote village to 30 kilometers away in a hospital in just 18 minutes. Hence, all these are examples of how artificial intelligence can improve the accessibility as well as affordability to quality healthcare. The second sector is that of agriculture. Now, artificial intelligence in agriculture can help to increase the farmer's income, as well as increase the farm productivity. Further, we can use artificial intelligence to even reduce the wastages which are caused in the sector of agriculture. A good example of this would be farmers can use the artificial intelligence in knowing the weather predictions, which will thereby give them a variety of choices in terms of the crop which they want to produce. Further, artificial intelligence can be used by farmers to monitor soil health, maintain supply chain efficiency. Artificial intelligence can also be used to determine the metabolism of crops and fruit bearing trees, etc. The third sector is that of education. Now, AI in education can help to improve the access as well as the quality of education which is currently being imparted in our country. So, therefore, the potential uses of AI would include augmenting as well as enhancing the learning experience through personalized learning, automating, speeding up the administrative tasks, predicting the need of the student, etc., all of which can help to reduce the dropout rate or even improve the vocational training in our country. The fourth use is in the smart cities or the infrastructure sector, where integration of artificial intelligence in newly developed smart cities and infrastructure can help to improve the efficiency as well as improve the connectivity in such areas, because it can help to meet the demands of a rapidly urbanizing population and hence provide them with an enhanced quality of life. The fifth sector where artificial intelligence can find a lot of use is in smart mobility or transportation. AI will help to bring in smarter as well as safer means of transportation and can also help to solve the issues relating to traffic congestion. A good example of this is driverless cars, predictive engine monitoring, maintenance, improving the traffic management, etc. So, therefore, you can have an idea how important artificial intelligence can be for India, provided it is harnessed correctly. Moving ahead, the Niti Aayog in its document has said to truly reap the benefits of AI, it has identified certain barriers that need to be addressed in order to achieve the goals of this national strategy for artificial intelligence. The foremost barrier is a lack of broad based expertise in research and application of artificial intelligence. Second is issues related to privacy and security, including the lack of a formal regulation in the sphere of AI. In fact, the second barrier is the theme on which this current article is based upon. The third barrier is the high resource cost of AI and the low awareness for the adoption of artificial intelligence amongst the people. Fourth barrier is the absence of a collaborative approach to adopt and apply the AI. Fifth and the last is absence of enabling data ecosystems which can help improve the AI's application. For example, access to intelligent data is still one of the foremost barriers. So now, having discussed what is artificial intelligence, what is the national strategy for artificial intelligence as released by the Niti Aayog and the sectors on which it is focusing, and lastly discussing what are the barriers which come in the way, let us now shift our focus to this article. Let us now see what the authors are suggesting in this article. Now, shifting our focus to the article, let us see why there is a need for a legal framework to regulate artificial intelligence. The need for regulation of AI lies in the way and nature and artificial intelligence work. The artificial intelligence systems are capable to learn from experience. Further, considering the fact that the AI technology is used to perform functions autonomously on behalf of the human beings is another reason why their regulation becomes so important. Because both of these factor their ability to learn from experience as well as the fact that they independently and autonomously are performing function for the human beings make AI one of the most disruptive and self-transformative technology of the 21st century. Therefore, it is but obvious that a technology which has such far-reaching implications and also holds the potential to disrupt our day-to-day lives, it is inevitable to come out with a policy where the states can try and regulate the artificial intelligence. To give you an example, the authors in this article are saying, what happens if electricity supply suddenly stop while a robot is performing a surgery and the access or a connection to a doctor is lost? Further, what happens if an unmanned aerial vehicle or a drone goes and hits a person? Hence, the authors are saying it's high time that all countries, including India, should be legally prepared to face such kind of disruptive technology. Moving ahead, the author then tells us what can be the possible challenges while adopting a legal framework for regulating artificial intelligence. Now, both these challenges are there because of the way criminal jurisprudence works. Because the foremost fundamental of criminal jurisprudence is ascertaining the intention or the guilty mind behind a crime. Because the foremost principle of criminal law is that while a person is doing a crime, there needs to be an intention to cause such a harm or to cause such a crime. Hence, guilty mind or intention is one of the foremost factors on which crime depends. But when it comes to artificial intelligence, ascertaining this intention or guilty mind becomes extremely difficult because at the end of the day, artificial intelligence is a technology and not a human being. So to give you an example, so what if an artificial intelligence based driverless car gets into an accident and causes harm to human or damages the property? Now in this situation, how is the court supposed to know whether the artificial intelligence purposely caused such a damage or was it through some error or technological glitch? Further questions like whether robots can be used as witness during criminal procedures or whether artificial intelligence can be used as a tool to commit various crimes. Such kind of questions are very common while deciding upon a legal framework to regulate artificial intelligence. The next challenge which can possibly arise is related to fixing the liability for that act or a crime. Because again, in criminal jurisprudence, in order to hold somebody guilty or to convict someone for some act, offense or a crime, the court first needs to fix the liability. That is to say that this particular person was responsible for this particular act. But considering the fact that artificial intelligence is an inanimate technology, that is, it is not a human being, it again becomes difficult as to who should take the responsibility for an act. And then lastly, the authors have provided certain way forward or suggestions. The first and the foremost is that we need to have a legal definition for artificial intelligence. Because having a legal definition will help to ascertain the legal personality of artificial intelligence. Because again, in India's criminal law jurisprudence, it is essential to establish the legal personality. Because having a legal personality means that there will be certain rights and obligations which will be attached to that legal personality. The second suggestion is to have a strict liability for the manufacturer or the producer of that technology. Because again, since artificial intelligence is considered to be inanimate, the strict liability scheme should hold the producer or the manufacturer of that product or technology liable for harm regardless of the fault. Now, strict liability again is a concept of law. To very simply say, strict liability is a legal doctrine which states that a party will be responsible for their action or their products regardless of the fact whether there was some kind of negligence or fault on their part. Now, usually strict liability is imposed in activities which are considered inherently dangerous or hazardous. For example, keeping wild animals will attract a strict liability. Another example of strict liability is when a person indulges in activities which are ultra hazardous, like transporting volatile chemicals or using explosives. Similarly, considering the fact that artificial intelligence is a disruptive technology, the manufacturer or the producer of a certain product or of that artificial technology should be held strictly liable for any damage which is caused by that product or by that technology. For example, if a driverless car causes an accident or damage to property or human beings, then in that case, the manufacturer or producer of that driverless car should be held responsible irrespective of how much precaution, care that manufacturer took. The third suggestion which the authors have said is that since privacy today is a fundamental right in our country, and also for the fact that artificial intelligence possesses a lot of data of the citizens, it is but imperative that artificial intelligence should also be included in the Personal Data Protection Bill of 2018, and this data protection bill should also include all those possible instances where there can be a breach of privacy of the data which is being held by the artificial intelligence. So this was basically all what this article was talking about. Based on discussion, please try and attempt this mains practice question. With this, let's move on to our next news. This news has been taken from page number 6 and it is titled In Stanford Ranking, Hope for Indian Science. Well, the context of this article is that recently Stanford University in USA has published a new report in which it has created a database of almost 1,60,000 scientists, which constitute top 2% of the scientists across the world in various fields. Now, this database by the Stanford University has been created based on certain standard indicators such as the information on citations, the H index, co-authorship, as well as a certain composite index. Hence, it is based on the number of research papers published by scientists, the number of times the scientist's name has been cited, and the H index is basically a measure of the impact of an author's or a scientist's work and other people's research. So based on these certain parameters and indicators, Stanford has created our database. Now, as far as Indian scientists are concerned, out of these entire 1,60,000 scientists, almost 1,500 or 1,600 rather, almost 1,600 scientists are Indian. Now, quickly coming to the findings of this ranking as far as India is concerned and what is relevant from the point of view of our examination is basically 4 observations. The first observation is that as far as the field of science and technology is concerned, scientists which come from government-supported institutions are far more as compared to scientists coming from private institutions. However, this trend becomes opposite when we look at the disciplines of medicine and allied sciences, because in medicine and allied scientists, more scientists from private institutions have found a place on this list. So in the field of science and technology, almost 4/5 of the entire scientists in this field of science and technology come from government-supported institutions. Government-supported institutions include institutions of national importance, central universities, state universities, government-funded research institutions, etc. In fact, in the discipline of science and technology, the share of scientists from government-supported institutions, especially the institution of national importance, is very high. And this helps us to draw the conclusion that in these government-supported institutions, more freedom and flexibility is given to a scientist to carry out their research and their work on any topic which they consider relevant. However, on the other hand, as I was mentioning earlier, in conventional and modern sciences, which includes your medical and all the allied areas, scientists from private institutions have excelled better. The second major finding of this study is that there is an equitable distribution of scientists working in institutions in both urban and rural areas. Hence, it is not the case that the scientists only from urban areas have appeared on this list. Even scientists from rural areas or areas which are far away from the from the urban hub of excellence, even they have appeared on the list. And this has highlighted the professional excellence and equitable sharing of excellence in rural and urban settings. And in fact, this finding can act as an incentive to many rising scientists from the rural areas to take up a career in science. Moving ahead, it is found out that in disciplines such as general and internal medicine, anatomy, ophthalmology, optometry, nutrition, diabetes, etc., scientists from private institutions have found mention, as I was saying earlier. So what does this necessarily tell us? This tells us, or this rather points to the fact that we need to reorient and relook the investment which we are making in the research and development of our government medical institutions, because clearly here the private medical institutions are performing a lot better as far as medicine is concerned. Furthermore, the Medical Council of India, the Pharmacy Council of India, and other regulatory institutions in the medical sector need to review their guidance and support which they are providing to their doctors and their scientists so that the research and development can be enhanced. Now, though Indian scientists have appeared in the list as far as science and technology, medicine is concerned, however, in certain fields such as anesthesiology, applied mathematics, emergency and critical care, genetics, hereditary and geology, only a few scientists have made the grade or found mention in the list. Hence, this database is a signal to all those scientists working in this field that they clearly need to pull up their socks and up their game so that they can perform better in their respective fields. Now, this is the major observation of this Stanford report. Now, this article here has also mentioned the relevance of NRF, which is the National Research Foundation. So, let us quickly talk about that as well. Now, see, India invests less than 1% of its GDP in education, research, and innovation. And it is considered that this low investment is one of the reasons why the education sector in India, especially the R&D sector, has not able to come up with. Therefore, considering all these factors, the new education policy of 2019 has suggested that a National Research Foundation or NRF will be set up with the main aim to boost research and innovation in all the higher education institutions in our country. Now, this NRF will be set up as an autonomous body and will look after all aspects of research ecosystem in our country, including the funding, mentoring, as well as building of quality research in India. Now, NRF will research projects across 4 major disciplines. This not only include science and technology, but also includes social science, arts, and humanities. Now, this has been done in order to bring the non-science discipline of research into the ambit. Furthermore, if additional streams or divisions of certain subjects such as agriculture, environment, etc. is required, then this can be added later on by the governing board of the NRF. Now again, we have certain statistics here which the draft National Education Policy had quoted. Now, in the year 2008, India was investing almost 0.84% of GDP to research and development. However, this fell down to 0.69% in 2004. And in fact, the education policy itself has stated that the investment in research and innovation is at all-time low of only 0.69% in our country. Whereas if we compare this figure with other developed economies of the world, then we are far behind. For example, in USA, this figure is of 2.8%. It is 4.3% in Israel, and South Korea spends almost 4.2% of its GDP in research and innovation, thus clearly pointing out to the fact why these countries are doing so well in the field of science and technology. Now, the National Education Policy has also found out that a lot of students are discouraged from taking up science streams. So, therefore, in order to motivate them better and to ensure that their participation increases in the field of science, NRF also suggests career counseling in schools to identify students who have interest and talent in the field of science. And NRF also wants to promote research at the university level and also provide internship or rather research internship to students in the undergraduate stream itself so that their interest in science can be maintained and can be bolstered. Furthermore, the new education policy also states that NRF will provide a reliable base of merit-based but equitable peer-reviewed research funding. So how the funding will be given? Funding will be given after peer reviewing the research, and this peer reviewing will be done totally on the basis of merit. Hence, it is felt that the NRF will pave a way for self-reliant India as it will advocate merit-based but equitable peer-reviewed research funding, and this will incentivize research and usher in a new culture of research and development in the country. Hence, in conclusion also, the author has stated the same thing, that the proposal of NRF as well as the reliance of India on Atmanirbhar Bharat and now this finding of the Stanford report, all of these are very encouraging and motivating in nature, and it is considered that all these development will only help to improve India's R&D in the coming days. With this, let's take up our next news. Now, this news I have taken from page number 4 titled High Court Stays Nod for OIL Project in Assam National Park. In this discussion today, we will be talking about the Dibru Sekhova National Park, and it forms part of your environmental section and is important from the perspective of your prelims. Well, to quickly tell you the context, what has happened is that the Guwahati High Court has put a stay on the earlier environmental clearance which was given to Oil India Company to carry out the extended reach drillings or the ERD operations at 7 locations in the Dibru-Sekhova National Park. And the reason why Guwahati High Court has put a stay on the environmental clearance is because the Oil India Limited was earlier asked in the year 2017 by the Supreme Court of India to carry out a biodiversity impact assessment study in this national park. And up till now, OIL has not started with this biodiversity impact assessment, hence the stay on its environmental clearance. Now, as far as Dibru-Sekhova National Park is concerned, this Dibru-Sekhova is one of the 5 national parks situated in the state of Assam, and it is both a national park as well as a biosphere reserve. The second biosphere reserve in the state of Assam is the Manas National Park. Manas is also a biosphere reserve. Now, the Dibru-Sekhova National Park is situated to the south of River Brahmaputra in the state of Assam. And as far as its vegetation and forest type is concerned, it comprises of both semi-evergreen forest, deciduous forest, littoral and swamp forest, as well as has certain patches of wet evergreen forest as well. In fact, this Dibru-Sekhova National Park is the largest swamp forest in northeast India. So this is an important fact for your prelims. It is also an important bird area as identified by the BirdLife International. And the important animals found in this national park include the tiger, elephant, leopard, Gangetic dolphin, gibbon, small Indian civet, squirrels, etc. And another fact important for the prelims is that the Maguri Motapung wetland is part of this reserve. So they can directly ask you that the Maguri Motapung wetland is part of which national park. Now, Assam basically has 5 national parks, and these are starting from the left. We have the Manas Wildlife Sanctuary. Manas is also a national park. We have Orang National Park here. We have the Nameri National Park. We have Kaziranga National Park. And we have the Dibru-Sekhova National Park towards the easternmost end of Assam. So please keep in mind the name of these 5 other national parks found in Assam, which are namely Manas, Orang, Nameri, Kaziranga, and of course the one which we discussed, Dibru-Sekhova National Park. Now this news appears on page number 1, and it is with respect to increase in the height of Mount Everest. Now earlier, Mount Everest in somewhere about in 1915s when it was measured, it measured somewhere about 8,848 meters. And now it has grown almost 8 centimeters and stands at 8,848.86 meters. In this regard today we will be talking about the formation of Himalayas. Well, formation of Himalayas is connected with the collision of the Indian continental plate with the Eurasian continental plate. Now the Indian plate included the peninsular India as well as the Australian continental plate. Now up till about 225 million years ago, the Tethys Sea separated this Indian continental plate, separated India from Asia. And when the Pangaea broke somewhere around 200 million years ago, India started its northward journey. And then about 40 to 50 million years ago, India collided with Asia, that is with the Eurasian plate, causing rapid uplift of the Himalayas. So this was continent-continent convergence. So between the Eurasian plate and the Indian plate, we had what was known as the Tethys Sea. And as Indian plate started to move northwards about 40 to 50 million years ago and collided with the Eurasian plate, the Tethys Sea was subducted. Now what was interesting was the fact that the landmass of the Eurasian plate and the Indian plate had more or less the same rock density. So because of this, it was very difficult for either of the plate to subduct below the other one. So what actually happened? Since the tension which was created due to the convergence of these two plates had to be somehow released, so rather than subduction, the convergence of these two plates led to the rapid upliftment of what is known as the Himalayas. In fact, this is the reason Himalayas are considered the youngest fold mountains of the world, and they are fold mountains, and Himalayas are considered as fold mountains because they have been formed due to continent convergence. In fact, scientists believe that the process is still continuing, and this is the reason why the height of Himalayas is also rising even to this date.